Have you ever heard the saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is? This phrase is often used to warn against scams and get-rich-quick schemes. And few people in history embody this cautionary tale quite like Charles Ponzi, a charismatic Italian immigrant who rose to fame in the early 20th century for his seemingly foolproof investment scheme. Ponzi promised investors incredible returns on their money, but the truth behind his operation was far from what it seemed. Hello everyone, welcome to another fascinating episode of our channel where we explore the incredible stories behind some of the world's most notorious scams and scandals. Well, in this video, we're going to uncover the secrets behind Charles Ponzi's infamous pyramid scheme and how it ultimately led to his downfall. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be amazed by this incredible story. The word Ponzi scheme or pyramid scheme refers to an investment strategy in which money from a steady supply of new participants is utilized to pay off previous investors while benefiting the scheme's developer. Charles Ponzi was most known for the financial crimes he committed when he duped investors out of millions of dollars and paid them back with the money of other investors. The scheme or fraud continues until, as is invariably the case, there are no more new investors and it fails. Although Ponzi was not the first person to use this scam to gain money, he is the most well-known and thus the one for whom it is named. Let's talk about how Charles grew up. Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Telbado Ponzi was born on March 3, 1882 in the northern Italian town of Lugo. Ponzi later revealed that his parents, Oreste and Imelda Ponzi, were from a wealthy Italian family that had fallen into poverty by the time he was born. Ponzi is reported to have demonstrated criminal proclivities as a child, stealing from his parents and even parish priests. He attended Sapienza University in Rome as a young man, and according to his admission, he was not a perfect student. As a result, Ponzi was forced to quit after 4 years with no money and no degree. During his undergraduate years, he had heard stories of other Italians who went to America in search of fame and money, and he decided that this was the only path left open to him. What was Charles Ponzi's lifestyle like when he got to America? Ponzi landed in Boston on the SS Vancouver in November 1903. He claimed in his autobiography, The Rise of Mr. Ponzi, that he left Italy with $200 but landed in America with much less. The $200 had gone down to $2.50 on the way over, and a card shark had taken the majority of it, along with the tips and the rest of it, Ponzi wrote. Ponzi managed to learn English and work various jobs throughout the next 5 years. After living in Pittsburgh, New York, New Haven, Connecticut, and Providence, Rhode Island, he eventually settled in Montreal, Canada, where he worked as a bank teller. When the bank failed, he lost his job. As was often the case with Ponzi, he returned to crime, resulting in a 3-year sentence in Quebec for forgery. Following his release, he began assisting in the smuggling of Italian immigrants into the United States. After getting caught, he was sentenced to 2 more years in prison in Atlanta. In 1919, after having set himself up in a small export-import business, Ponzi received a request for an advertising catalog from a Spanish company. He discovered an international reply coupon, IRC, inside the envelope, a form of voucher acceptable in foreign countries in replacement for local postage stamps. Ponzi rapidly saw the money-making possibilities of buying IRCs in one nation and redeeming them in another by taking advantage of exchange rate disparities. The racket of international reply vouchers truly fell in my lap like a ripe apple, Ponzi wrote in flowery writing. I didn't even need to shake the tree to obtain it. I simply reached over and collected it from where it had fallen. It appeared to be in good condition. Luscious. I looked for flaws in it. There were none found. I had no choice but to bite. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have been human. Ponzi had found arbitrage at this point, which is the simultaneous buying and sale of an asset in two different markets. Little pricing disparities provide for a small profit. When done on a large scale, purchasing IRCs in Italy for one price and exchanging them for higher-priced postage stamps in the United States would provide a big profit. Ponzi would have been free and clear if he had stopped there. Sarah Howe, who founded the Ladies' Deposit Company, a savings bank aimed at unmarried women in Boston in the late 1870s, was one of the first practitioners of what became known as the Ponzi scheme. Howe promised an 8% monthly interest rate, which she achieved by compensating early depositors with monies from new consumers. This is the epitome of a Ponzi scam. Ponzi established the Stock Exchange Company in 1920, through which he sold stock, promissory notes, with a 50% interest guarantee after 90 days. The cash raised from investors was expected to be used to purchase IRCs for redemption in the United States. Ponzi instead used the monies collected from new investors to repay previous investors. Ponzi justified his actions by blaming the Universal Postal Union for banning the sale of IRCs after learning about his coupon redemption program. Ponzi shifted to his rob Peter to pay Paul scam after attempting to avoid suspension. It worked for a time. In the first 8 months of 1920, he earned $15,220 million in 2023 currency. He kept the ruse continuing by informing investors that he had set up a sophisticated network of agents who were buying IRCs for him overseas that he could redeem for a handsome profit in the United States. In reality, there was no intricate network of coupon buyers. He was just leveraging new investments to repay previous investors. The United States Postal Service no longer sells IRCs as of January 27, 2013. International reply coupons acquired in other countries can be exchanged for a first-class mail international 1-ounce letter-sized stamp in the United States. Charles Ponzi was eventually convicted on federal charges. We all knew it would come to an end. The Boston Post ran a front-page article on Ponzi in July 1920, estimating his net fortune at $8.5 million. Less than a week later, the United States Postal Service announced increased conversion rates for international postal reply coupons, while officials claimed the adjustment had nothing to do with Ponzi. Inquiries into Ponzi continued but made little progress until the Boston Post initiated its inquiry, which generated negative headlines and caused Ponzi to refuse fresh investments. Current investors fled, and Ponzi allegedly paid out more than $1 million. Further negative news from the Post sealed Ponzi's downfall. He was later convicted on federal mail fraud charges and sentenced to 312 years in prison. After being released on parole, he was convicted of state charges, jumped bail, apprehended, and returned to prison, eventually being released in 1934. He was deported to Italy at the time, having never acquired a U.S. citizenship. His life in Italy and Brazil is unknown, but he died on January 18, 1949, at a charity hospital in Rio de Janeiro, leaving only $75 to pay for his burial. How much did Charles Ponzi steal from investors? What's the biggest amount you can come up with? Ponzi made an estimated $15 million, $220 million today, in 8 months in 1920 by convincing thousands of Bostonians that he could make them wealthy. What do you think happened to Charles Ponzi after he was deported from the United States? According to one account, he traveled to Brazil from Italy to head a nascent airline that was ferrying supplies to Italy during World War II. According to one story, once the U.S. entered the war, it and the Brazilian government shut down the airline. Ponzi worked as an interpreter and teacher of English and French. On January 18, 1949, he died in a charity hospital in Brazil, practically bankrupt. Charles Ponzi was the most flamboyant early practitioner of a scheme in which the fraudster constructs a plausible investment, recruits participants, and then utilizes money from older investors to pay off newer investors while profiting handsomely. He wasn't the first to think of it, but he is the one who gave it its name, the same tactically famously used by Bernie Madoff, who stole $65 billion. Ponzi is accused of stealing an estimated $15 million, equivalent to $220 million today. This is where we end the story of Charles Ponzi. What are some of the largest Ponzi schemes in recent years you know? You can comment below. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel so you won't miss out on content like this.